Get her out of my command post. We don't have time for tourists playing dress-up. The words from Fire Captain Davis, sharp and dripping with condescension, cut through the tense air crackling with radio static and the distant roar of the inferno. The other firefighters, a mix of veterans and rookies huddled around the incident map, offered a few nervous chuckles, their eyes flicking towards the woman standing silently near the edge of the tent. She was of average height and build, her face obscured by the collar of a standard-issue turnout coat that looked a size too big, her hands methodically checking the seals on her breathing apparatus. She offered no retort, no flicker of anger, no defensive posture. Her entire being was a study in stillness, a calm island in a sea of controlled chaos. But when the regional FEMA director, a retired admiral named Thompson, stepped out of his vehicle and saw her stance, the precise, economical way her hands moved, the unwavering focus in her eyes as she scanned the burning warehouse, he saw something else entirely. He saw a weapon patiently waiting for a target. If you believe that true strength is measured in action, not volume, and that competence is the only voice that matters in a crisis, type silence below. Captain Davis continued his tirade, his voice a bullhorn of arrogance meant for the audience of his men. "Look, ma'am," he said, the title an insult in his mouth. "I appreciate that Washington sent an observer, but this is a 5-alarm chemical fire, not a budget hearing. That building is a powder keg of unknown solvents and pressurized containers. My guys are risking their lives in there. The last thing I need is a federal liaison with a clipboard getting in the way, or worse, getting hurt and becoming another problem I have to solve." He gestured dismissively toward her, a grand theatrical motion of impatience. The woman simply finished her gear check, the click of her regulator seating into place the only sound she made. She didn't look at him. She looked at the fire. She studied the color of the smoke, the sickly yellow-green plumes that spoke of chlorine compounds, the thick, oily black that indicated hydrocarbons. She watched the rhythm of its breathing, the way the structure seemed to inhale before belching another wave of heat and fury. Her silence was not empty. It was absorbent. It took in every piece of data, every panicked radio call, every shift in the wind, processing it all with a terrifying placidity. To Davis, her stillness was ignorance. To the few who had seen its kind before, it was the calm before the storm, the profound quiet of a professional who had walked through far worse hells than this one and had returned every single time. The crisis arrived without warning, a deafening roar that shook the very ground. A flashover. A massive section of the warehouse roof, weakened by the intense heat, collapsed inward. The radio transmissions dissolved into a storm of static and panic shouts. "Mayday, mayday! Command, we're trapped! Section Charlie, total collapse." Then a more terrifying sound, silence. Captain Davis's face went white, his bravado evaporating like water on hot steel. He stared at the schematic, his mind unable to process the catastrophe. His team, 4 of his best firefighters, were inside that tomb of twisted metal and superheated gas. Protocol dictated a defensive posture, to write them off as a tragic loss to prevent further casualties. The building was too unstable, the entry point gone, the risk incalculable. He froze, paralyzed by the impossible choice. But the woman, the tourist, was already moving. There was no hesitation, no request for permission. She moved with a liquid efficiency that was utterly alien to the frantic energy of the scene. She grabbed a halogen bar and a thermal imager from a truck, her movements not hurried, but impossibly swift, each step taken with a clear and undeniable purpose. She was no longer an observer. She was an operator, and her mission had just begun. She didn't run toward the main entrance. The path everyone assumed was the only way in. That was a death trap, a funnel of flame and collapsing debris. Instead, she moved along the building's periphery, her eyes scanning the exterior wall with the focused intensity of a predator. The thermal imager in her hand was an extension of her senses, allowing her to see the heat signatures of the trapped men, to map the internal structure of the fire through the concrete. The other firefighters watched, mesmerized as she stopped at a section of solid, 12-inch thick reinforced concrete wall, a place no one would ever consider a point of entry. It was the building's structural spine, the most fortified part of the entire warehouse. Davis, snapping out of his stupor, yelled into his radio, "What is she doing? Get her away from there. That wall is solid." But his words were lost in the roar of the fire and the sudden, shocking sound of steel striking concrete. With a technique that was brutally elegant, she slammed the forked end of the Halligan bar into a barely perceptible joint in the precast panels. She didn't use brute force, she used physics. Each strike was a precise application of leverage and torque, a violent, percussive conversation with the structure itself. The concrete groaned, then splintered. In less than 90 seconds, a section of wall that would have taken a rescue team with heavy equipment 10 minutes to breach simply fell away, creating a clean, man-sized opening into the heart of the inferno. A wave of stunned silence washed over the command post. It wasn't possible, but it had just happened. Admiral Thompson walked calmly from his vehicle toward the command post, his face a granite mask of authority. The chaos seemed to part for him, the panicked energy receding in the face of his immense, quiet presence. He didn't look at the fire. He looked at Captain Davis, whose jaw was hanging open in disbelief as he watched the woman's solitary silhouette disappear into the breach she had created. The Admiral's voice was low, calm, but it carried the weight of decades of command. "Captain," he said, the single word cutting through Davis's shock. "Give me the file for the Federal liaison." Now a subordinate, fumbling with a laptop, quickly brought up the personnel record. The screen glowed in the flashing emergency lights, illuminating a wall of blacked-out, redacted text. Thompson didn't even glance at it. He already knew what it said. He knew the moment he saw her check her gear, recognizing the practiced, almost meditative rhythm of a warrior preparing for battle. He had seen that exact same stillness in the eyes of the operators he had sent into the darkest corners of the world, the quiet professionals who did the impossible as a matter of routine. He turned his gaze from the screen to the stunned faces of the firefighters, letting the weight of the moment settle upon them. Their world of assumptions, of loud confidence and superficial judgments, was about to be irrevocably shattered. "Captain Davis," the Admiral began, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper that forced everyone to lean in, "you asked who that woman was. You called her a tourist. You dismissed her." He paused, letting the shame hang heavy in the air. "Her name is Lieutenant Commander Maya Rostova. The file calls her a Federal liaison for interagency disaster response. That is a lie designed for men like you." He pointed a single, steady finger at the screen. "Unit classification, United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Her last operational tour is a black hole of redactions. Her list of qualifications includes Master Breacher, Special Operations Combat Medic, and Advanced EOD." He let the titles land like hammer blows. "You were worried about her getting in the way. Captain, that woman has single-handedly breached fortified compounds under enemy fire that make this warehouse look like a garden shed. You ordered her out of your command post. Men with more stars on their shoulders than you've seen in your entire life have asked for her permission to enter a room." Just then, Rostova emerged from the smoke-filled opening, dragging the last of the 4 unconscious firefighters to safety before turning back to the inferno. Without a moment's hesitation, Admiral Thompson snapped to the most rigid position of attention he had held in years and rendered a sharp, perfect salute to the soot-covered woman. "Lieutenant Commander," he barked, his voice ringing with absolute respect. "Report." The ripple effect was instantaneous. The sight of the decorated admiral saluting the mysterious woman sent a shockwave through the assembled first responders. The story began to spread before the fire was even out, whispered from firefighter to paramedic to police officer, a modern legend born in smoke and concrete dust. They called her the ghost of Gate 5. They talked about the breach she'd made, now christened the Rostova Cut, with a mixture of awe and disbelief, as if it were an act of magic rather than a demonstration of elite skill. The tale leaped from the fireground to the station houses, then to online forums and text message chains. It was a story about more than just a rescue. It was a parable about the danger of assumptions. It became a lesson whispered to rookies. The quiet ones are the ones you watch. The ones who don't need to talk are the ones who have already done it all. The narrative of her silent competence became a powerful counterpoint to the culture of loud, boastful confidence that often permeated the ranks. Her actions forced a moment of collective introspection. Who had they overlooked? Who had they underestimated based on gender, or size, or a quiet demeanor? Her presence, though brief, fundamentally altered the cultural chemistry of the entire department, seeding it with a newfound respect for the professionalism that requires no announcement. The next morning, Captain Davis found Lieutenant Commander Rostova by the equipment truck, methodically cleaning and recalibrating her own SCBA system. She worked with the same focused precision she'd shown at the fire, each movement deliberate and sure. His own gear, which she had also used, sat nearby, already cleaned to a standard he had never seen before. He approached her not as a superior, but as a penitent. The arrogance from the day before was gone, replaced by a deep and profound humility. "Ma'am," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "Lieutenant Commander, he struggled for the words. "There's nothing I can say. I was wrong. I was arrogant. And you saved my men. Thank you." Rostova didn't stop her work. She simply paused, looked him directly in the eye for the first time, and nodded once. "Check your seals, Captain," she said, her voice even and devoid of judgment. Complacency kills. It was not a rebuke. It was a lesson, the most important one he would ever receive. Later that day, just before she departed, a young firefighter saw her quietly showing another rookie a more efficient method for dressing a fire hydrant, not with a lecture, but by guiding his hands. A grainy, pixelated image from a nearby security camera, capturing her lone figure walking toward the wall of fire, was printed out. Within a week, it was pinned to the bulletin board of every firehouse in the city. There was no name, no caption. None was needed. A year later, the city's fire academy unveiled a new mandatory training module for all incoming recruits and veteran captains alike. It was called the Rostova Doctrine. The course focused on dynamic threat assessment, unconventional breaching techniques, and, most importantly, the dangers of cognitive bias in high-stress environments. The lead instructor was Captain Davis. He used the recording of his own panicked, dismissive word from that day as the opening lesson in what not to do. He used the story of his own failure, his own monumental misjudgment, as a powerful teaching tool. He spoke of Lieutenant Commander Rostova not as a superhero, but as the embodiment of a professional standard he now dedicated his life to upholding. The Rostova cut was recreated on the training ground's breachable wall, and recruits spent hours trying to replicate the impossible economy of motion she had displayed. None could, but in trying, they learned the deeper lesson, that true mastery is a language spoken through action, and that the loudest voice on a scene is often the least informed. Her intervention had saved 4 lives that day, but her legacy, carried forward by a humbled captain and an inspired department, would go on to save countless more. The story of the quiet woman who walked through fire became institutional folklore, a modern myth told to wide-eyed recruits to instill a fundamental truth. You do not know who is standing next to you. You do not know their history, their training, their capacity for courage. The legend of Maya Rostova was not a tale of superhuman strength, but of profound, unshakable competence. It was a testament to the idea that respect is not a courtesy to be given, but a debt owed to demonstrated excellence. Her legacy was not etched onto a medal or a plaque. It was written into the muscle memory of 1,000 firefighters checking their gear with a new level of diligence. It echoed in the newfound hesitation of a captain before dismissing a subordinate. Her silence had been a lesson, and that lesson had become the department's new creed. True strength doesn't need to declare itself. It doesn't need validation or applause. It simply waits, calm and prepared, for the moment it is needed. And in that moment, it is the only thing that matters. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.